The fishermen knew the rules. Never swim in the Kappa pond after sunset. Never leave a child unguarded near the riverbank. And never, ever look directly into the water when you hear something laughing beneath the surface. But on that humid summer evening in 1773, somewhere along the banks of the Sumida River, he forgot. Just for a moment. He knelt down to wash his hands, and that is when he saw it. A child's face staring back from the murky depths. Green skin, webbed fingers, and on top of its head, a small dish-like cavity filled with water that seemed to glow in the fading light. The creature smiled, not with malice, not with hunger, but with something far more unsettling. Recognition, as if it had been waiting for him. The Kappa reached out one clawed hand, and the fisherman understood what every Japanese person has known for centuries. Japan does not have ghosts. Japan has yokai, and they're not stories. They are neighbors. Long before Buddhism arrived from the mainland, long before the first emperors unified the islands, the people of Japan understood something fundamental about their world. They were not alone. Every shadow held a presence. Every forest concealed a spirit. Every object, if old enough, could awaken with intention and purpose. The word yokai appears in texts as early as the 8th century, but the concept is far older. It translates roughly as strange apparition, supernatural creature, or phenomenon that defies natural law. But translation fails here. Because yokai are not simply monsters. They are not demons in the Western sense. They are manifestations of the liminal, the in-between, the places where the natural world frays at the edges and something else bleeds through. Some are benevolent. Some are malicious. Most are simply indifferent to human concerns, operating by rules we barely comprehend. And here is what makes them different from myths anywhere else on Earth. The Japanese never stop believing. Even today, in one of the most technologically advanced nations on the planet, yokai are not relegated to ancient history. They are part of the cultural DNA. They appear in manga, anime, video games, shrine warnings, and late-night conversations. Because in Japan, the supernatural never left. It just learned to coexist. To understand yokai, you must first understand the Shinto worldview that birthed them. Shinto, the indigenous spirituality of Japan, does not separate the sacred from the mundane. Everything contains kami, divine essence or spirit. A mountain is not just geology. A river is not just water. They are living entities with personalities, moods, and the capacity to respond to how they are treated. This belief created a culture of profound ecological respect, but also profound caution. Because if everything is alive, everything can be offended. Leave a tool unused for a century, and it might become a Tsukumogami, an object that gains sentience through age and neglect. Disrespect a forest, and the Kodama tree spirits might lead you in circles until you collapse from exhaustion. Mock a fox near a shrine, and you might anger an Inari messenger who will unravel your entire life with elaborate trickery. The yokai pantheon emerged from this animistic foundation, but it was turbocharged by centuries of cultural exchange. When Buddhism arrived in the 6th century, it brought with it concepts of karma, rebirth, and hungry ghosts. These ideas fused with native Shinto beliefs, creating hybrid creatures that defied categorization. Chinese folklore added dragons, shapeshifters, and celestial bureaucrats. Local legends contributed region-specific terrors. And slowly, over more than 1,000 years, Japan accumulated what might be the most extensive supernatural catalog in human history. Scholars estimate there are between 700 and several thousand distinct yokai, depending on how you count regional variations. Some are famous. The Kitsune fox spirit with up to 9 tails, growing more powerful and wise with each century of life. The Tengu, bird-like mountain demons who taught swordsmanship to legendary warriors. The Oni, massive horned ogres who served as both punishment and protection, depending on the story. But most yokai are obscure, hyper-specific, almost absurdly particular. There is the Akaname, a creature that licks the filth from dirty bathrooms. The Shirime, a creature that appears as a normal person until it turns around and reveals an eye where its anus should be, purely to startle passers-by. The Makurageshi, a spirit that flips your pillow while you sleep for no reason other than mild mischief. This specificity reveals something crucial. Yokai were not created by priests or storytellers alone. They were crowdsourced. Every village, every profession, Every household had its own encounters, its own explanations for the inexplicable. A fisherman who lost his nets blamed the Umi-bozu, a giant shadowy figure that rises from calm seas. A carpenter who injured himself blamed the Mokimo-kurin, eyes that appear in torn shoji screens. These were not legends handed down from authority. These were lived experiences, passed from neighbor to neighbor, parent to child, woven into the fabric of daily life. And because they were so embedded, so specific, so localized, they became impossible to erase. But something fascinating happened during Japan's Edo period, from 1600 to 1868. The country sealed itself off from most foreign contact, creating 2.5 centuries of relative peace and isolation. And in that cultural greenhouse, yokai exploded. Artists like Toriyama Sekian began compiling illustrated encyclopedias of supernatural creatures, codifying oral traditions into visual taxonomies. Suddenly, yokai were not just stories. They were categorized, ranked, debated. Street artists produced cheap woodblock prints called yokai, making these creatures accessible to commoners who decorated their homes with images of the Noppera-bo faceless ghost or the Rokurokubi woman whose neck stretches impossibly long at night. Kabuki theaters staged elaborate yokai performances. Writers penned Kaiden ghost story collections that became bestsellers. The creatures evolved with the culture. During times of plague, the Amibi mermaid-like creature became a symbol of disease prevention, its image distributed as a protective charm. During famines, stories of the Gashadokuro giant skeletons formed from the bones of starvation victims reflected collective trauma. Yokai became a language, a way to process fear, change, natural disaster, and social upheaval without directly confronting horror. They were psychological release valves disguised as folklore. Then came the Meiji Restoration in 1868. Japan forcibly modernized, adopting Western science, technology, and rationalism at breakneck speed. The government actively discouraged superstition. Shinto was reformed and sanitized. Many assumed yokai would vanish, dismissed as embarrassing relics of a backward past. But they did not vanish. They transformed. When electricity arrived, people reported seeing yokai and power lines. When trains cut through ancient forests, conductors spoke of encounters with displaced spirits. The creatures adapted faster than the skeptics could dismiss them. And here is where you need to understand something important. If these stories resonate with you, if you are realizing that every culture has its own way of naming the unnameable, subscribe to this channel. Because what we are exploring here is not just Japanese folklore. It is a blueprint for how humans everywhere create meaning from mystery. And the yokai teach us something the modern world desperately needs to remember. That not everything can be explained. That some truths live in the spaces between logic and dream. That the world is stranger and far more alive than we have been taught to believe. Today, yokai are everywhere in Japan, but not in the way you might expect. They do not lurk in forests, waiting to terrify hikers. They sell instant ramen. They star in children's cartoons. They appear on manhole covers, train station murals, and city mascots. The town of Tsukumogami erected an entire street lined with bronze statues of yokai, attracting tourists who pose for photos with the Nikko Museum Catgirl and the Noppera-bo Wall Spirit. Pokemon, one of the most successful franchises in entertainment history, is essentially a yokai collection game rebranded for a global audience. Studio Ghibli films like Spirited Away and Princess Mononoke are love letters to yokai culture, introducing international audiences to concepts like the kami of the forest and bathhouse spirits. But beneath the cute commercialization, something deeper persists. In rural Japan, shrines still maintain yokai-related rituals. Farmers leave offerings to appease the Kappa before planting rice in waterlogged fields. Boatmen avoid certain river bends where the Umi-bozu is said to appear during storms. And after the Fukushima disaster in 2011, stories emerge of evacuees encountering yokai in the abandoned radiation zones. Shapeshifters moving through empty streets. Strange lights in evacuated homes. The rational explanation is trauma, collective grief, and the mind's attempt to process unimaginable loss. But to dismiss it as merely hallucination misses the point. Because yokai have always been more than literal creatures. They're how a culture articulates experiences that defy conventional language. Loneliness becomes the beta-beto-san, invisible footsteps that follow you down empty roads. Guilt becomes the ubyum, a ghostly mother eternally searching for her lost child. Ecological destruction becomes the Kodama's silence when a sacred tree is cut down without ceremony. Western psychology might call these projections, archetypes, cultural constructs. But the Japanese understanding is more nuanced. These are not just symbols. They are presences that exist in the interaction between human consciousness and a world that refuses to be fully tamed by technology or rationality. The yokai persist because they fulfill a function that science cannot replace. They remind us that we do not control everything, that some mysteries should remain mysteries, that the world is not a machine to be dissected, but a living, breathing entity that demands respect, humility, and a willingness to coexist with forces we cannot fully comprehend. So are yokai real? You could spend your life searching forests and rivers for physical proof and find nothing. No bones, no DNA, no empirical evidence that would satisfy a laboratory. But you would be asking the wrong question. Because the yokai were never meant to be captured or dissected. They were meant to be encountered, to be felt in the prickling sensation when you walk through a forest at dusk, to be sensed in the moment a familiar room suddenly feels wrong, to be understood as the name we give to experiences that resist explanation. Every culture on Earth has developed its own vocabulary for the supernatural. Europe had fairies and demons. Africa has spirits tied to ancestors and land. The Americas have skinwalkers and wendigos. But Japan might be unique in how seamlessly it has maintained this vocabulary into the 21st century. There is no contradiction in the Japanese worldview between building robots and honoring fox spirits, between launching satellites and leaving offerings at roadside shrines, between embracing modernity and acknowledging that some things are older, stranger, and more fundamental than progress. This is what makes yokai so relevant right now. In an age where everything is quantified, explained, and optimized, they stand as a reminder of what we lose when we demand that the universe conform to human logic. They are permission to not understand everything, to be comfortable with ambiguity, to accept that the world is wilder and more mysterious than our spreadsheets and algorithms suggest. If this exploration of Japan's spirit world made you question what else might be hiding in the margins of consensus reality, share this video. Because these stories are not just entertainment. They are a different way of seeing, different way of being human. And in a world that increasingly feels flattened by sameness, maybe what we need most is to remember that there are thousands of ways to be strange, thousands of ways to be sacred, thousands of ways to be alive. The yokai have been trying to teach us this for centuries. The question is not whether they exist. The question is whether we are still capable of listening.